Okay. This is an interview with Lieutenant Colonel Harold Jarvis on March 30th, 2008. He's going to recount some of his war adventures and tell us about his life in general.
Well, as you know, I was in the Army for almost 6 years. I went in the Army in 1942. I had earlier enlisted in the Army and been postponed being called to active duty. And I was called to active duty and went to training at Shepherd Field, Texas in mid-January of 1942. It was bitter cold when I got there. I'd been living in San Diego in comfortable weather. And I was sent to Amarillo to Texas, where it was bitter cold. And I started out without a uniform. They didn't have any new uniforms in stock at the Army base. And it was about a week before I could get uniform, but I had to fall out and work every day just in the lightweight suit that I had worn from San Diego. But I survived this to go through basic training at Shepherd Air Force Base in Texas. And when I left Shepherd, I went to California to the West Coast Flight Planning Command to Santa Ana, California.
Now, what took you to California in the first place?
Well, I was living in Texas and I couldn't get a job anywhere, and I had a cousin who was running a manager of an A&P store in San Diego, California. He told me he'd give me a job there if I could get to California, and I hitchhiked my way to California and went to work in the A&P store. I worked a 62-hour week. It was 5 hours, 10 hours a day for 5 days and 12 hours on Saturday, so I made 62 hours a week for $16 a week. And fortunately, I was able to get my room and board paid for by washing dishes at night. And there was a boarding house not far from the A&P store, and I got a place to stay there.
Can you hold up this picture there of what you looked like when you were in uniform? Show it to us a little better.
All right.
I don't know.
I then went to March Army Airfield and enlisted in the Army Air Corps. And in mid-January I was ordered to active duty and sent to Texas, and then after 9 weeks of training in Texas, I went back to California, to Santa Ana, California, to the Santa Ana Air Base.
Now, when did you meet your wife during all of this?
Well, when I was working at A&P, I was going to church at Scott Memorial Baptist Church in San Diego. And I went to the evening BYPU group at the Baptist Church, and I met Martha there. And we became well acquainted with one another and grew attached to one another and pursued a steady dating situation. Now, Martha was still in high school. She graduated from high school. No, this is Martha. She graduated from high school, and I then went, after my training at Santa Ana Army Air Base, I was sent to Northern California to a flight training base.
So did you live in San Francisco for a while, or where were you living when you went to the flight training?
Well, I was living on the base at the flight training base. It was
Where was it? What city was it near?
It was in Tulare, California.
Didn't know you'd ever lived there.
Yes, and Tulare was a pleasant weather place, and we went into training flying Stearman aircraft. And I learned to solo in the Stearman aircraft, and I went on to get about 30 hours of flight training there. Then I went on to basic training down in Southern California.
Now I know where my phone is. Well, tell us about when you got married.
Well, I went through primary flight training at Tulare, California, and then I went to Southern California for what we call basic training. And I flew in a BT-13 for 30 hours of basic training. Then I was transferred to Marfa, Texas. And before I went to Marfa, I proposed to my girlfriend Martha, and she agreed to marry me. And I went on to Marfa, Texas, flying twin-engine aircraft, AT-17s. And I got acquainted with the chaplain there on the base at Marfa Army Airfield, and he agreed to perform the wedding for us, and he did on March the 4th, 1944. Then after that, I graduated from flying school on March the 15th, 1944, and received my wings and a commission as a second lieutenant in the Army Air Corps. Then I was transferred to Austin, Texas, to Bergstrom Air Force Base, which was flying C-47 aircraft. So I trained to fly C-47s at Bergstrom. This was a much more intense training situation than I had had before, but I graduated from flying C-47s and was assigned to go overseas to the South Pacific, to the 13th Air Force. And after about 6 weeks, I transferred to the South Pacific by way of flying an aircraft. Of myself and another crew, and the rest of the crew, flew an aircraft from San Francisco to Nadzab in New Guinea in the South Pacific. And there I was assigned to the 403rd Troop Carrier Command, which was a command which was designed to drop paratroopers. And I made one mission, and I dropped paratroops at Buna in south part of New Zealand. And then I was transferred from the basic flying unit that I was first assigned to headquarters of 13th Air Force. I was very fortunate to be sent to the Air Force headquarters, because at Air Force headquarters I had access to more desirable missions. All the missions were assigned through the Air Force headquarters, and the people in the Air Force headquarters raked off the best missions for themselves. And fortunately, I was in that group that got the best missions. Then I flew a number of times with Filipino guerrilla units. We supported the guerrillas in the Philippines. And I made various flights to various islands where the Filipinos had a guerrilla group organized. My main job at that time was flying in ammunition to the guerrilla forces and sometimes taking out wounded to the hospital. and I was assigned a unit to fly from Australia. I was sent to Australia to pick up a new aircraft, a C-47, which was being forwarded to our squadron at Air Force headquarters. And I was flying with another Air Force crew on the way to Australia when we had a mishap off the island of Mindanao. We lost an engine. The engine went out on the aircraft. Now the aircraft is designed where it can fly on one engine, subject to the load it's had on. Now, unfortunately, we had 25 men on board the aircraft, and that made a pretty heavy weight. And the aircraft would not fly on one engine. And it was decided we were going to crash, and we decided we'd land in the water. We'd make ditch the aircraft. And we did ditch the aircraft off the island of Mindanao, about 75 miles south of the northern tip of Mindanao. And we were in this territory was held by the Japanese. We were in Japanese territory, but fortunately we didn't see any Japanese troops. There were no troops right where we landed in the water. And a lot of Filipinos came out, showed up to help us, but they recognized who we were by the type of aircraft we were flying. They knew it was an American aircraft, so they assumed we were American crew, which they were correct. And they told us that there was a guerrilla radio station about 75 miles up the coast from where we were. And it was decided that the best thing we could do would be try to get in contact with this radio station and get help to take out the survivors from our crash. Fortunately, in this crash, not a person was injured. We hit the water about the third jump before we stopped, and we were all buckled in our seat belts, and not a person got injured in the water landing without a single injury. Now, I was one of the first ones off the aircraft. I jumped out and swam over to the wing of the aircraft, and one of the men in the aircraft tossed me a rifle. And I was laying up on the wing of the aircraft with a rifle, not knowing what to do with it. I'd never been trained in rifle firing, so I didn't know how to handle the rifle. But fortunately for us, there were no Japanese in that area, so we didn't have to fear that. Now the aircraft